The fluorescent lights of Marco's diner cast their glow across the worn floor as 48-year-old Carlos Rivera wiped down the counter. It was a Friday night in downtown Portland, and the dinner rush had finally subsided. Carlos had owned this diner for 18 years, transforming it into a neighborhood institution where everyone was welcome. His staff knew the unwritten rule. If someone was genuinely hungry and had no money, they got fed. But tonight, Carlos felt a nagging sense of unease. Something was missing. The boy. For the past 3 months, a homeless boy had been coming to the diner almost every evening around 6 o'clock, always sitting at the same booth in the back corner, always ordering the same thing, a grilled cheese sandwich and water. The boy looked to be about 11 or 12, with dark hair that hung in his eyes and a wariness that broke Carlos's heart. He never caused trouble, never asked for anything beyond his simple meal, and always left a handful of coins. Never quite enough, but clearly everything he had. The boy's name was Leo, but beyond that, the child remained a mystery. But Leo hadn't come to the diner in 6 days now, and his absence gnawed at Carlos with increasing intensity. "Have you seen Leo lately?" Carlos asked Rita Santos, one of his longtime servers. "Not for almost a week," Rita said, concern in her eyes. "It's not like him to just disappear." Carlos nodded. "I'm worried something happened to him. He's just a kid living on the streets in November. I'm going to look for him after we close tonight." Rita offered to come with him, and at 11 they set out into the cold Portland night. They walked through Pioneer Square, past groups of people huddled around fires, past tents and doorways. Carlos stopped to show Leo's description to anyone who would listen, but most people just shook their heads. At the youth shelter, a staff member named Kevin told them that a boy matching Leo's description had been brought in by police a week ago, severely malnourished and dehydrated with a high fever. "We called an ambulance and he was taken to Portland Medical Center," Kevin said. "When kids come through our system in that condition, especially minors with no guardian, Child Protective Services gets involved. He's probably in state custody now." The words hit Carlos like a physical blow. The next morning, Carlos and his wife, Anna, a social worker for Portland Public Schools, drove to the hospital. After hours of frustration, Anna's professional connections led them to Patricia, a social worker in the pediatric unit. "There was a boy admitted last week matching your description," Patricia said quietly. "He was here for 3 days, treated for malnutrition, dehydration, and pneumonia. He's been discharged to a foster home in the Northgate area." She paused. "When he was here, he kept asking about a diner. He kept saying he needed to get back to Marco's diner, that someone there would be worried about him." Carlos felt tears spill down his cheeks. "That's my diner. And he was right. I am worried about him." Patricia gave them the contact information for a CPS supervisor. "Call her. Fight for him. God knows he needs someone in his corner." Anna spoke firmly. "We need to consider becoming foster parents. We've talked about it before. Maybe this is why. Maybe Leo is why." Carlos felt his breath catch. "Let's do it," he said. "Let's start the process." That Monday, Carlos called the CPS supervisor, Linda Chen. After explaining his connection to Leo, Linda said that hypothetically, if such a child existed and had been asking about a diner, it might be beneficial for him to know that people there cared about him. Over the following weeks, Carlos and Anna threw themselves into becoming licensed foster parents. They attended orientation sessions, completed background checks, and opened their home to inspections. The process was exhausting. On December 10th, they were officially licensed. Carlos kept the back corner booth at the diner empty and started leaving a grilled cheese sandwich and water at that table every evening at 6 o'clock. The regular customers noticed and started contributing to a fund to help homeless youth. By mid-January, the fund had grown to over $12,000. On January 18th, Carlos received a phone call from Linda Chen. "I'm calling about a situation that's developed with a case I think you'll be interested in," she said. "Can you meet with me this afternoon?" At the CPS offices, Linda told them Leo's story. Leo had been born in Eugene to parents who had struggled with addiction. When Leo was 10, his mother had overdosed and died, leaving him alone for 3 days. Leo had been placed with his maternal grandmother in Portland, an elderly woman named Dorothy Chen. For nearly 2 years, Leo had cared for his grandmother as much as she had cared for him. In August, Dorothy had suffered a massive stroke and died. He didn't tell anyone, Linda explained. He was terrified of going into foster care, so he just disappeared. Carlos realized Dorothy had died in August, and Leo had started coming to the diner in September. He lived on the streets for 3 months, Carlos said, his voice breaking. Linda nodded. He's a remarkable kid, but he's also deeply traumatized. We placed him with a foster family after his hospitalization, and it didn't go well. He ran away twice. After the second time, we moved him to a group home, but that's been even worse. He's shut down completely, barely eating, not speaking. His caseworker is worried that if we don't find a better placement soon, he's going to run again. Carlos leaned forward. Are you asking if we would foster Leo? Linda met his eyes. I'm asking if you would be willing to try. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. It would be incredibly difficult. Leo has experienced multiple traumatic losses. He has attachment issues, trust issues. He might run away. He might test every boundary, trying to prove that you'll give up on him. Are you prepared for that? Carlos looked at Anna. We're prepared, Carlos said firmly. We want to give him a home. Linda smiled. Then let's make it happen. I'll talk to Leo about the possibility. He has to be willing to at least try. But I'll tell him about you, about the diner, about the fact that you've been looking for him. A week later, Linda told Carlos that Leo remembered the diner and was willing to meet with them. On February 1st, Carlos and Anna met Leo for the first time in an official capacity. The boy who walked into the conference room was both familiar and heartbreakingly different. He was cleaner now, his dark hair cut short, wearing clothes that fit. But he was also thinner, his face gaunt, his eyes holding a deep wariness. Hi, Leo, Carlos said gently. I don't know if you remember me, but I'm Carlos Rivera. I own Marco's Diner, where you used to come for dinner. Leo stood in the doorway, his arms crossed, but his eyes flickered with recognition. I remember, he said quietly. You always made sure I got extra fries. Carlos felt tears prick his eyes. That's right. And you always ordered the same thing? Grilled cheese and water? You were my most reliable customer. A ghost of a smile crossed Leo's face. I didn't have money for anything else, he said defensively. We knew that, Anna said gently. And we didn't care. We were just glad you came. We were worried when you stopped coming. Leo's defensive posture softened slightly. Why? He asked. Why would you care? I was just some kid who came to your restaurant. Carlos leaned forward. You weren't just some kid, Leo. You were a child who needed help, who trusted our place enough to come back night after night. That meant something to us. When you disappeared, I couldn't just forget about you. I needed to know you were okay. Leo stared at him, the internal struggle visible on his face. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Ms. Chen said you want me to come live with you. Why would you want that? You don't even know me, Anna answered. You're right. We don't know you very well yet, but we'd like to. We'd like to give you a home, a safe place. We can't replace the people you've lost, Leo, but we can offer you stability and care and a chance to just be a kid for a while. Would you be willing to try? Leo's eyes filled with tears. What if it doesn't work? What if I mess it up? What if you decide you don't want me anymore? Carlos felt his heart break. Then we'll figure it out together. Leo, this won't be easy. You've been through things no kid should have to go through. You might be angry sometimes, or scared, or you might want to run away. But here's what I can promise you. We won't give up on you. We'll show up every single day. We'll be there. That's what family does. The word family hung in the air. Leo looked away, his shoulders shaking. When he finally looked up again, there was something new in his expression, a tiny, fragile seed of hope. Okay, he said quietly. I'll try. The transition happened gradually over the next 2 weeks. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, Leo moved into the Rivera home officially, carrying all his possessions in a single garbage bag. That first night, Carlos made dinner, grilled cheese sandwiches. Leo stared at the plate, and when he looked up at Carlos, there were tears streaming down his face. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for remembering. Carlos sat down across from him, his own eyes wet. I remember everything, Leo. I remember how you always sat in the back corner booth. I remember how you would make that sandwich last as long as possible. I remember how you would leave those coins on the table, every penny you had. I remember all of it, and I want you to know that you never have to worry about that again. You'll always have enough to eat here. You'll always have a place at this table. Always." Leo cried openly then, the walls finally crumbling. Anna came around the table and gently put her arm around his shoulders. And for the first time in months, maybe years, Leo allowed himself to be comforted, to accept that maybe he didn't have to be alone anymore. The following months were not easy. Leo struggled with nightmares, with panic attacks, with a deep-seated belief that this stability would be ripped away. He tested boundaries constantly, staying out past curfew, refusing to do homework, pushing back to see if Carlos and Anna would give up on him. But they didn't give up. Carlos showed up at Leo's school for parent-teacher conferences. Anna took him to therapy appointments every week. They established routines, family dinners every night, weekend outings, movie nights on Fridays. Slowly, incrementally, Leo began to believe that this might be real, that this might last. He started doing his homework without being asked, started coming home on time, started talking about his day at dinner. He made friends at his new school, joined the robotics club, and brought home a report card with B's and C's that Carlos and Anna celebrated as though he had won a Nobel Prize. In May, 3 months after moving in, Leo asked if he could start working at the diner on weekends. Carlos agreed, and Leo became a fixture at Marco's diner, bussing tables, washing dishes, and eventually learning to work the grill. The regular customers who had heard Leo's story welcomed him warmly. In August, 6 months after Leo had moved in, Carlos and Anna sat down with him for a serious conversation. "We've loved having you here, Leo," Anna began. "You've become part of our family, and we can't imagine our lives without you now. So we want to ask you something. Would you be willing to let us adopt you? To make this permanent?" Leo stared at them, his eyes wide with shock. "Adopt me?" he repeated. "You want to adopt me? Like, forever?" Carlos nodded, his throat tight. "Forever. We want you to be our son, legally and officially. We want you to have the security of knowing that this is your home, that we're your family, that nothing is going to change that. What do you think?" Leo's face crumpled, and he began to cry. Deep, wrenching sobs. Carlos and Anna moved to embrace him, holding him as he cried. "Yes," Leo finally managed to say between sobs. "Yes, I want that. I want to be your son. I want to stay forever." The adoption process took several months. On December 15th, exactly 1 year after Carlos and Anna had been licensed as foster parents, they stood in a county courtroom with Leo between them as a judge officially declared him Leo James Rivera, their legal son. After the adoption was finalized, they celebrated at Marco's Diner, which Carlos had closed for a private party. The staff was there, along with Leo's new friends from school, regular customers who had followed his story, and Linda Chen from CPS, who had tears in her eyes. Rita Santos, the shift supervisor who had helped Carlos search for Leo that first night, pulled Carlos aside. "You know what the best part of this story is?" she said, smiling. "It's not just that you saved Leo. It's that he saved you too. He reminded all of us why we do what we do, why we show up every day and try to make this little corner of the world better. He reminded us that every person who walks through that door has a story and deserves to be treated with kindness and respect. That's a gift, Carlos. That's what Leo gave us." Carlos looked across the diner at his son, who was showing his friends how to make the perfect grilled cheese sandwich, his face animated and happy. "You're right," Carlos said softly. "He did save us. He saved me from becoming complacent, from forgetting that every act of kindness matters, that we have the power to change lives if we're willing to pay attention and care. And that was the greatest discovery of all. If you love stories where the truth is revealed, you've found your channel. Subscribe and turn on notifications to make sure you're always up to date with life's biggest secrets and dramas. And now, I want to hear from you. What life lesson did you learn from this story? Share your reflection in the comments and use the hashtag #TruthRevealed, also telling us the city you watched this drama from.